record to this computer. There we go. We're in.
Yeah, it's going to be recorded this evening. But so if you didn't want to feature in the recording, keep the video off, basically. The Q&A element will be featured in the recording as well. And I think that's it. I think that's the
Yeah.
most important bit.
Yeah.
And now we're going to just jump into the talk. Actually, does anyone have any initial questions about Zoom and using it, or struggling with any of the application elements that they want to ask about before we start? No. Oh, hi, Kate. Hi. Oh, good. Amazing, Amy. Thank you. Yeah, so that's it.
Cool.
Hand, go for it.
Woo. All right, I'm going to share my screen as we've got a like presentation sort of thing as we go along. So, welcome to Designing Your Brand Identity, a Creative Partnership. Let me just move this guy up here. So obviously this is an overview. We've kind of put quite a bit about this online already. And obviously we'll dive into all these like sections as we go along. I am Han, and this is Shah, as we've just introduced ourselves. I'm a graphic designer, stroke illustrator, and I've been doing this for about 8 years now, since I left university. I work predominantly with small businesses, um, and do a lot of work. I used to do a hell of a lot of work with like posters for small businesses, and it's kind of evolved into book work, and doing a lot more like branding stuff, a lot more illustration work. Um, but obviously everything sort of informs each other, with my practice. So a lot of my branding work is quite illustrative, has lots of like fun use of color and type and little kind of hand-drawn abstract elements. And then obviously I did the Endless Love logo and work on all the posters for the markets and all the extra marketing bits that come with the branding. Um, Me and Charlotte have been working together for about 6.5 years now.
Yeah.
Um, and it's been an absolute joy. I absolutely love working on Endless Love stuff. It first began with life drawing posters and the very first Makers Market poster, which is the second one along. Um, do you want to chat about your first poster, Charlotte? And
Yeah.
your kind of
Uh,
journey with
so
hiring?
me DIYing it. So yeah, I'm Shah. I run Endless Love Creative, which is now host to makers markets across the UK, growing from Sheffield, my hometown, to Newcastle and now Edinburgh. I've been running my business for almost as long as Han's been freelance. So I started in 2017, hosting live drawing events, and that was I kind of dipped my toes into hosting events very steadily. It's been a very organic journey, and so is my relationship with Han. I think for the first year and a half, you can see, yeah, the first poster on the left-hand side, that little flyer, that's my drawings. I used to draw quite a bit, and I didn't have the budget, and didn't really know how to start with branding. So I did it myself. And I realized quite quickly that to be reaching a wider audience and to understand maybe the world of branding, that I was going to need support. So it took me a year and a half to kind of find Han and think about really what my business was going to become. So actually, instead of life drawing as my priority, which was the first bit I did, I got Han to do my Makers Market poster. And so the logo branding element, the bigger part of it, the bigger picture, came a bit later. But I just wanted to take a lower risk. So I did the Makers Market posters. And you'll see that actually on the first poster we did together, there's no branding, there's no logo, there's no smiley face, which became synonymous to Endless Love. And it gradually just grew, our collaboration style. Definitely, there were like little moments where I was like, oh, I have to ask for what I want. I have to collaborate. I'm so used to working on my own. Um, yeah, there was definitely, I know Han's going to ask me a couple of questions in a bit, but ultimately, it was the best thing that I did, getting that support and guidance and a bit more professional direction for my business so I could reach a much wider audience. And it's obviously grown phenomenally since. Uh, and so, yeah, so we've got posters, we've got lots of different kind of in real life branding from signs that like my A board there, but also all the posters, all the flyers backs, even little marketing documents that I put around the city, all Han, which has been amazing. And then things had to kind of pivot during lockdown. And I kept hold of a couple of things. So my online website is all kind of Han's artwork is all over that. And then also my social media feed has lots of different elements that Han has crafted for me that work in collaboration with the posters, which is like the main thing. But yeah, it's been great.
Um, yeah, so we just basically have obviously put this talk together. We kind of just want to instill some confidence. Obviously, the thought of like offloading any kind of creative need or any functional need to someone else can be really like difficult and scary, especially when like you own a business and it's your baby and you want to like kind of nurture it and grow it organically on your own. But we just sort of want to give the confidence, show that it's really doable. There's loads of different approaches. Um, it's not a one size fits all sort of thing. And there's loads of like different elements to it that you can pick and choose what you want to do. And there's going to be like a graphic designer for everyone out there. If I keep looking to the left, it's because I've got notes. Because I can't do this without notes for like 2 hours. But yes, so what do we mean when we talk about branding? Branding is a little bit of an umbrella term, and we might use branding or brand identity interchangeably throughout the talk. They basically mean the same thing. And when we speak about these, we're referring to like all the many different components that make up a whole brand. So you've got the immediate things like your logo and color palette, which are super important, but there's lots of different things, touch points within a brand that create a visual system that engages a potential customer or client. So I have broken this down. Let me see if I can make this a little bit smaller, maybe. There we go. I've broken this down into categories of back of house stuff and front of house stuff. So your back of house bits would be like what the customer doesn't necessarily see, but is important research elements that inform how your brand looks in the end once you've kind of like gone through this process of branding or rebranding. Um, Within this, you've got things like competitor analysis and market research, which is an understanding of who your product or service is for, looking at the existing market and seeing where your product or service sits within that, figuring out who your competitors are, what they're doing, what you want to do differently to them to set your brand apart. You've got your brand story. Is there a special reason why you started your brand that might resonate with a potential customer? Can this forge a genuine connection with your audience that sets you apart from competitors? You've got brand values. Do you, as a business owner, have strong opinions on things like sustainability, feminism, equality, fair pay? Could these things be intertwined with the way that you run your business? Will you show that, and how will you show that? Does your business use sustainable packaging? Do you donate a percentage of profits to a charity that's close to your heart? I'm just gonna let this extra person in. Hi, Leanne. We've got started, but this is all recorded, so you'll be able to catch up on the first bit online for the next like week or so. Um, we're not too far in at the minute, but yeah, welcome. Um, So then you've also got brand purpose. Do you have a USP? This can be relating to your product itself or your brand in general. It could be that you make everything yourself by hand and you really want to put a focus on that. And that can impact your customer and help market your brand in a specific way that's like really niche to what you're doing. You've got brand positioning, and this links back to your target market, what kind of person they are. Are they people that are happy to invest more money into your product, or are you looking to sell your product at a lower price point to make it more accessible? Where do you see yourself in that market, and who are your peers? Who are the people that you want to surround yourself with? Other businesses that are doing similar things in your industry that you see as people you could bounce off, people that are doing things that are a little bit different, that aren't what you want to be, kind of falling into the category of. these are all like super important things that you can think about prior to actually starting to think about how your brand might physically look. This all informs the strategy of your brand, um, and is kind of the backbone of a long-term plan. Obviously, it's great to think about the here and now and where your brand is at the moment, but where's it going to be in a year's time, 3 years' time, 5 years' time? Having a look at like all these invisible back of house things can really inform your growth and how your brand evolves over the next kind of like period of its existence. Then you've got your front of house stuff. Obviously, quite a lot of this will probably be quite obvious. You've got your logo suites. You'd have a primary logo that's your sort of main thing that is seen pretty much everywhere, but then you'll have secondary versions perhaps. Sometimes you need things in different formats. Perhaps you need it in like a landscape format rather than portrait. So you'd have a secondary logo that works for different spacing needs. You might have a text-only version for when it's super small. You might have a logo mark or an icon, like a standalone symbol that encompasses what your brand is about. You have a color palette. Different colors evoke different emotions. You might want to think about if there's anything relevant to your brand that you really want to kind of bring through in your color and your use of color or your lack of use of color. You've got typography, also super important. Different fonts evoke different emotions too. Something big and chunky like this front of house font is going to give you a different feeling to like a serif font that's a little bit more elegant and refined and sophisticated. It's all about kind of figuring out the personality of your brand and bringing that through in your visuals. Um, it's not just your logo font, you've got other stuff like your subheadings, titles, body copy. There might be 2 or 3 fonts that your graphic designer picks out that kind of work harmoniously together. Um, some fonts you pay for licensing, and that comes as like a kind of secondary cost to what you're paying your designer. But you can tell your designer, I've got this budget for fonts, let's go with this for now. See what kind of is available within your kind of spend limit. Absolutely fine to kind of set those sort of restrictions if needs be. You've got illustration, you could have a brand mascot, brand shapes, brand patterns, um, loads of different visual things that you can bring in to sort of back up that front of house suite that is going to kind of give you the visuals that you need to carry your brand forward. You might want to look at what kind of photography you're using. Are you going to use stock photography? Are you going to use mock-ups? Are you going to take your own photos? Are you going to hire a photographer? Do you want to incorporate custom icons into your website? Are you going to think about copywriting, tone of voice, the amount of writing that you use? Is it going to be really chatty and colloquial, or are you going to be quite formal? Again, just like fonts, different tones of voice can bring in like different feelings to your brand. And then you've got all your things that go across digital, print, and packaging. So that would be your website design, social media, how you show up there. You've got print, such as like flyers, posters, stickers, and then packaging, which obviously would be things like thank you notes, business cards, tape, actual boxes. Um, it's really like kind of an endless amount of things that you can really consider depending on what your brand is. Um, but these would all come under this kind of what I would call the front of house design stuff, which is your visuals and like your final deliverables after you've gone on this journey through like looking at your back of house bits. Um, all these things can help build a brand that's cohesive, unique, and memorable, which in turn should begin to equate to a more loyal customer that relates to what you offer, an upturn in engagement and overall success, growth, and sales. Obviously, it's not all down to just branding, as in visuals, but these things really can help elevate your brand and kind of set you apart against any competitors, bring value to what you're doing, and create a customer that's like really engaged. Sometimes a graphic designer might wear a lot of different hats, and sometimes they'll focus on like select few parts within our industry. You might want to bring in another creative to do other like elements of your branding. You might want to bring a copywriter in, or a photographer, or an illustrator. For those with bigger budgets or funding, it can be an option to hire someone specifically for like just your logo design. So there's a lot of people out there doing just like type design, and they can create like a custom piece of type for you that is just becomes your logo, um, rather than a pre-existing font. Um, and then you'd have like a separate team perhaps to do all the other elements of your branding. But as I say, a lot of designers wear many hats. So you might actually find someone that can do all of it, or they might know someone that can do other parts of it. Um, why is branding so important? It is the first point of contact that a potential customer has with your brand, and it visually demonstrates some of the back of house stuff, such as your brand values, your purpose positioning before they even know what your brand is. It creates recognition, which helps customers remember your business and in turn builds that trust and credibility, forges an emotional connection. They might then be more likely to come back to you, or they might think about you as like, oh, that person does that thing. Maybe I could go to them for this piece of jewelry that I'm like looking for. It's about kind of creating a stamp in the customer's mind, so that you're one of the first that kind of pops into their brain in a relevant situation. It shows consistency, commitment, and passion. Good and intelligent branding shows that you're committed and passionate about what you're offering to the world, and that can help increase the perceived value of your product and can dictate your brand positioning and give you an edge over any competitors. And it can lighten the load on you as a small business owner or a maker or an entrepreneur. Um, it kind of lends itself to easier and better marketing down the line. If you've got a solid brand pack and you've got fonts, colors, social media templates ready to go, that means you're spending less time doing those things and you've got more time to be doing the parts of your business that really rely on you as a solo person. Um, it just kind of delegates them jobs to someone else that can do it quicker and to a higher sort of quality. Um, and then you can be spending your time in the best way possible. When is the right time to hire a designer? It's going to be different for everyone. Some people will do it themselves for a while, reach before they reach out to a designer. Some people want to get it done before they even set up properly. There's not really a right or wrong way, and it's going to be different for every different person. We understand that there's a lot of things to consider before hiring someone to do this kind of work, and it's not just an off the bat, quick, I need a logo sort of thing. Um, some signs that you might be ready to hire someone, your visuals might feel a little bit inconsistent. Your brand might not be standing out against competitors. You might be expanding your services or launching a new product and you need your visuals to look the part. You might be juggling too much, going back to that notion of lightening the load. There's only so much one person can do. And if you've got to a point with your brand where you just don't have the time to be looking at redoing your logo or doing all these like different color palette and type explorations, that might be a good time to start thinking about who else to hire in. Um, you might be wanting to build on your brand's presence and grow your brand, or you might be pivoting and wanting to raise your prices a little bit, target a new audience. Your current brand identity might be holding that change back a little bit. So that would be a good time to hire someone and get a second opinion on how to kind of make your brand thrive. Side note that you might not always feel ready to hand over the responsibility, and that's fine. Your designer should be there to work with you and kind of feel like a missing jigsaw piece. We're not there to kind of take over everything and dictate what you do and tell you what's best and not take your opinion into consideration. And I'm sure Charlotte will kind of be able to speak a little bit on this, where it's hard to kind of like offload these things to someone else and trust that they're going to do a good job with it. I was going to ask Charlotte, when did she feel ready to start working with a graphic designer? Does she have any insight on that sort of thing?
And you? So for me, it did take a little while. It took a year and a half before I reached out to Han of me starting my business. I definitely wanted to test the waters to see where it was going. But once I found Han, which is through a little bit of searching and luck, I think a little bit of luck through Instagram. If some of you might have heard of Pippi Eats, Han has done the covers of some of Pippi's cookbooks, and I saw one of the books, and I saw some of her posters, and I thought, oh my God, I want to feel, I want my business to feel like that energy. So I saved it in my notes, and then I was like, oh, I don't know what to do because I don't know if I've got the budget. I don't know whether does my business even deserve to step up in this way? It looks so professional. But then I saw Han worked with a small indie business called Nighttime Holiday, a jewelry brand who I knew from my first ever market. And I was like, no, this is it. This is my chance to kind of level up. And it was definitely stepping out of my comfort zone, but I think it wasn't a case of money. I was so skint. My budget, I didn't wasn't even thinking about budgets at that point. I just knew I wanted to contact Han and know how much it could cost and how much it would cost. So that was my first step. But it was definitely me wanting to level up and be what you've mentioned about like that consistent professional, being seen as like a stand apart. I've
Mhm.
definitely always been like that. That was
Yeah.
what gave me a push.
Mhm.
Um, for you, what do you look for from us? Like when you get that first email through, what do you want in that email from like someone looking for a designer?
Yeah, like you can often tell, you can tell when someone is kind of more in a position where they've really put like a lot of work into more of that like back of house stuff. Um, and sometimes I get people come to me and they kind of like have a really clear idea of what they're wanting to do. They're like super focused on it. But that's not necessarily always like the greenest flag in the world. Like I think just something as simple as like actually emailing and using your name goes a long way. And
Mhm.
just telling you like a very like brief kind of intro to your business and why you're reaching out to that designer in specific. I'll go into this a little bit deeper, a little bit further down the talk. But yeah, it just kind of is nice to see that a potential client is like interested in what you're doing and is on the same page as you as a designer. But obviously completely understand that like it might be a very new experience to someone and they might not know what they have to bring to the table. Um, Obviously with the talk and the guide that accompanies it, we're hoping that we can kind of get that word out and really help people with having that confidence to come to us with just like a very solid like starter email and the kind of foundations to build like a really strong relationship between a designer and a client. But yeah, that's what I would say is like what I really look for in their first emails. If it's just a like, hi, how much is a logo? You can kind of think a bit like, are they serious about it? Are they gonna like actually understand the value of it? Do they actually want to even get a logo or like a branding package done? Um, it's very telling on a first email. But yeah, like I think I remember like you first emailed and said about the markets and about like the live drawing and I think just having like the reference to you've seen my work somewhere else, that's kind of like a really nice starting point, I think. Um, because obviously like there's got to be a reason why you're emailing one person specific, or you might be emailing multiple people, like that's fine to shop around. But yeah, kind of got to see that little glimmer of why me? Um, but obviously, yeah, like it's like super difficult to pass on work or a business to someone else. Like a
Mm.
really daunting thing, as I'm sure you will agree.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like my initial thoughts were Um, I'm quite stubborn and tight with money. So initially I was like trying to fight through it, like I can do it. But ultimately, once I heard about pricing and what you could offer and how easy it was to communicate with you, it was just like a breath of fresh air. Like I've never been more relieved and excited. And even though I was nervous about being like, what if I don't like it?
Mhm,
Um, ultimately I knew your style and it was what I saw Endless Love could be.
mhm,
Um, and yeah, there's just a communication, just like it was such an open space for me to say oh, can we try a shape like this? It didn't feel, there was no element to it that felt like intimidating, which is what initially I was nervous of. But I think, yeah, the risk factor is totally outweighed by the fact that I had let go of something that I knew was so important to my business. I was like, oh, thank God. Like someone else can take that
Like
responsibility. Who's
that weight is
actually
off my
skilled.
shoulders now, it's yours.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was just like, yeah, it has just completely opened up not just my time, but like my mind a bit. Like I've got more space to focus on other things because someone who understands it and has the skill set has taken it on board. So
Mhm.
yeah, it was just like a breath of fresh air. But,
Yeah, for sure. There's quite a lot that like a graphic designer can obviously, or any kind of creative professional can bring to your brand or your business. Obviously the first one would be expertise. Some of us have like got formal education, some people are self-taught. It's not really like a one is better than the other situation. I think especially with things like branding design, obviously there's like kind of hard and fast rules that you're meant to follow within graphic design, but it's about understanding your style and the kind of clients that you want to work with as a graphic designer. And then that ultimately is going to shine through with your expertise and your knowledge and like kind of your understanding of good and bad design. As a business owner, you're not necessarily going to know that like text needs to be set a certain way or like not to leave one word on its own at the bottom of a paragraph, which is called a widow, or not to leave a word on its own at the top of a paragraph, which is got a different name that I can't remember right now. There's things like this that we just offhand know to do that you wouldn't know to do yourself as a business owner that doesn't have a background in graphic design particularly. And like tiny little things like that are just going to really neaten the way that your brand is like kind of perceived by the world. Graphic designers are visual problem solvers, and we're often thinking about things, particularly like branding design, in a much more conceptual manner. Again, not something that you as a business owner might be equipped to do. Um, and like as I said, it's fine to kind of find your feet and do it yourself for a little bit or whatever. But if you're feeling like it's the right time, then this expertise is like super, super valuable. We can offer fresh perspectives. The way that we interpret information might be completely differently to the way that you would interpret it. And obviously, that's going to be different from person to person. We can offer a lead to like creative solutions that you might not have ever considered. Our knowledge within our industry can open up opportunities for your brand. We might know people in like kind of the design or creative sphere, um, printers, paper suppliers, um, other creatives like illustrators, photographers, like kind of people that I touched on before that can like help with that front of house suite of visuals for your brand. Um, we can be kind of like the middleman between that and another person or another service. Um, like things that we've seen throughout our research sort of parts of different briefs might come to light that you've never seen before. So it could be like a specific shape of a business card with like a specific die cut that would work so cool for your brand, but you might never have seen that before and not even know it exists. But we see things like that across like Pinterest or like through our peers like all the time. So yeah, them fresh perspectives um can kind of bring in things that you as a business owner aren't particularly like not expected to know all the time. Um, Going back to the notion of kind of lightening the load, it can help streamline your work. Like as a business owner or maker, you're going to be juggling a lot. Um, Bringing in a designer can like offer you that opportunity to streamline your workflow and be spending your time wisely on the things that you really need to be doing within your business instead of messing about on Canva or messing about on the Adobe suite and sort of trying to get things to work and getting frustrated if they're not working. Um, like obviously from my perspective, it's easy to say just give that to someone else, but it has to be acknowledged that it is kind of one of the things that can really help you spend your time better. Um, which leads me on to that part. Say you've got like Instagram templates made already, and you can literally just drop your text in, change your copy out each time, change your background color, and then you're ready to go. You can then be spending your time making your products, keeping shop, or you can have like an evening off instead of sitting thinking after work, I need to like do a load of Instagram posts for the next week or LinkedIn posts, or I need to update my website. Like if that stuff is there ready for you to go, it's like a couple of hours out of your month and it's done with, instead of having to kind of fit it into your actual scheduling and it take a lot more time. How to find the right designer is the next section. There's tons of different places that you can find designers, loads of different approaches, and you've kind of got to first figure out what sort of person, studio, or agency is right for you. There's going to be different strokes for different folks, and what works for you might be different for someone else. What someone thinks is like the bee's knees of having a graphic designer work for them might not be the standard that you want. It's kind of about shopping around and figuring out who's the best fit for you and your brand or you and your product. So you can either be working with a solo designer, which is what I am. Normally we're like classed as freelancers. A lot of the time we're directly like client to client and sorry, freelancer to client and work with our clients one to one. So that's like directly emailing. Not so much within design, but if you're working with like an illustrator, they might have an agent. But again, it is like still a solo person doing the work at the end of it. Some of us have like a niche or a speciality, or further experience in other roles. So for me, a lot of my work is influenced by my illustrative style, whereas there's graphic designers out there that just kind of focus on less of like a personality design and like kind of see it from kind of less of an illustrative perspective. Or they might be handy with camera, they might be like specialized in packaging, they might specialize in web design. Um, but yeah, you could like there's loads of people out there that are like kind of good all-rounders and they're just solo designers doing their own thing. In the guide that we'll be sending out after this talk, there's a creative directory in there with like a whole bunch of people that are kind of doing a similar sort of thing where they're freelancers working on their own. They might be doing it outside of a day job or might be doing it full time. But a lot of them tend to offer like design services plus illustration or design services plus website design, branding design. Um, so that hopefully will be super handy with like direct links to each person's Instagram. Um, Other than solo designers, you could be working with a studio or an agency. So a studio would be a smaller group of creatives working more like a collective, usually like kind of under like one roof in-house sort of thing. Or an agency, which is a lot of the time a bigger team, and it'd be um a team that would maybe some people be remote. They might have different offices worldwide, like often agencies are global and like they're kind of like the top dog. But obviously, for small businesses, solo people, it's not always necessary to kind of go with something as big as that. But these two approaches offer that kind of combination of different creative roles under one hat, under one roof. So you'd have like, they might have different tiers of graphic designers, like a junior, a senior, a creative director, a copywriter in-house. So you're kind of getting everything for that one price that you're paying, rather than going to someone like me that's a solo designer that might suggest working with someone else and paying them separately, or doing parts of the branding yourself if you feel like you're like able to, things like copy or photography or like your social media stuff. Um, Studios and agencies, because of the nature of them being multiple people and bigger kind of functioning things, they likely have the resources to go deeper into a project and kind of give you a lot more, but obviously with that comes a higher price point. They would tend to be more appropriate for startups with funding. So I'm thinking like the first thing that pops into my head is something like Mob Kitchen, um, like a brand of that sort of size where they've kind of got a bit of an audience and like a bit of a humdrum before they kind of get going, and then they can just do it all from the very get-go. But But obviously for smaller small business owners or like makers, like solo entrepreneurs, that often might not be within your budget, which is absolutely fine. Like I said, different strokes for different folks. Um, it's worth noting that some solo designers might refer to themselves as a studio. This kind of just reinforces like legitimacy, and it's just like a perspective sort of thing, how they kind of want to put themselves out to the world, or they might be looking to expand and get other people involved in the future and kind of do it as an actual studio thing. But just wanted to kind of put a side note in that if someone looks like it's a single person and they're calling themselves a studio, might well be worth like reaching out to them if you're after a solo designer, because they might actually be a solo designer. Um, it's kind of really important to understand what's right for you because what works for you as a small business owner might be different for the next person. Um, you need to be thinking about what kind of experience you're hoping for. Do you want an ongoing professional relationship with someone, or do you want to have a whole team on board? Do you feel like you want something more formal and more colloquial? Do you see it being like someone that, like for mine and Charlotte's professional relationship, is now kind of more of a friendship, and like we're sort of 6 years down the line, really on the same page with like what she wants from her business and what I'm providing. Um, obviously you need to have a think about how much money you're wanting to invest. That can often dictate who you're going to go to, but doesn't have to be like the one thing that really has like the most impact, even though obviously money is super important. Um, it's worth thinking about. I really think it's worth thinking about how much you want to scale your business. Um, you might be a solo maker doing like makers markets and being happy selling at your makers markets, not thinking about like expanding further and further. Like that's totally acceptable. You can be happy doing that as a one person thing and not looking to scale your business. But then someone else might be running a small brand and wanting to scale the product to the masses eventually, or like looking at like wholesale, or looking at opening a bricks and mortar shop. So like a different approach to who they have as their graphic designer might work for them better. But as I said, there is absolutely something for everyone. Um, there is a hell of a lot of graphic designers out there, and we all offer different things. So with a little bit of research, you would definitely be able to find someone that's a good fit. There's different places that you can find designers. Obviously, social media is a massive one. You've got Instagram, I guess TikTok a little bit, but maybe not quite as much. On there, I tend to see people doing like more tutorial sort of things as opposed to like showing like real life work that they're doing. But with Instagram, that's really great because you can use that similar accounts button. So if you find one graphic designer that you like, you can press that little kind of, it's like a little person button with a plus, and then it will show you similar accounts. So it'll be like other designers that are doing similar things to that person. And that might be a case of like, oh, you find someone that you prefer the work of even more than that original person, or someone that's more within like your budget, someone that's working with similar brands to what you have. Um, you don't know if like there might be a better fit in there. Obviously, a lot of people will be tagging who's done their design work in the captions of their posts. So definitely worthwhile looking there too. Pinterest is super great, but do be mindful sometimes people pin things that aren't their own work. So just make sure that like if you're clicking a link to what you think is the source, like that it is definitely the right person that it's linked to. If it's going to like a website or a Instagram account. There's Behance, which is a creative portfolio site. I'm not too sure. I don't use that anymore, but when I've briefly been on over the past few years, like it seems to be like still like working as like a functioning portfolio kind of thing. And there's another one called Dribble with like three or four B's in it. Um, they could be like a good starting point to kind of just get an idea of like other visuals, kind of used in the same way as Pinterest, like as a bit of a mood board sort of thing, pull in like inspiration for what you want to be doing with your brand. Um, there's websites like Creative Boom, it's nice that. Um, These often do like spotlights on designers and other creatives. They're a really good place to find people that are like doing really well in the industry. And then of course, like in real life, away from a screen, you might be in a shop and really like their branding or their tissue paper that they're like gift wrapping things in. Um, and there's absolutely no harm in asking who their graphic designer is. Or you might be at Endless Love Creative Markets and see someone with like really cool branding and business cards and have a chat with them about who's done their work. Like, there's absolutely no harm. It's not like a poaching thing, to speak to people and kind of get them word of mouth recommendations, about who they're working with. In terms of finding a designer, obviously you want someone whose portfolio and values aligns with your own. Obviously, the ideal is to hire the right person first time round. But there's like kind of a few things that you could maybe have in mind, prior to actually reaching out to help ensure that you kind of get that right in that first email. Um, so someone like, for example, if you're a business that is claiming sustainability and you want that to run throughout your products and your packaging and like everything that kind of aligns with your brand, you're not then going to go to a graphic designer or another creative who is really vocal about climate change being a hoax. Like it's just little things like that. You can see what people kind of where they stand in society and like if you want to align with that. Um, because obviously like that could run through their work, that could run through how your brand looks to other people. It's just about aligning values with your own vision, and making sure that again it's someone that you could potentially be friends with and have like a long-standing like professional relationship with. Um, Obviously a massive one is that they come recommended by other people. Word of mouth is great. And if people are singing someone's praises, a lot of the time, there's going to be a reason for it. So definitely kind of keep an eye on who's shouting who out within that sort of sphere. Um, Following on from that, obviously, if they've worked with brands that are similar to yours, works in a similar way of word of mouth. So there might be like specific designers that do a lot of work within the beauty industry. So if you had a beauty brand, selling like handmade soaps, you might want to have a look at what they're doing. There might be a designer that does a lot of like really functional, beautiful Shopify websites. Um, and that's like really integrated, sorry, into what they're doing. Have a look at like what they're doing if that is relevant to your business. It's kind of like a case of figuring out who in your industry is using specific people and if they might be the right person for you because they're quite knowledgeable of what is going on in your industry. Obviously, a designer's USP or their niche can work to your benefit. So for me, like I work with a lot of small businesses. Um, I understand like pricing constraints, budget constraints. I understand that they're going to use like specific like printers, like online printer services rather than going to a specific like small business to do it. Um, so I think that's why I get like a lot more small businesses coming back to me because I've got that kind of knowledge that aligns with what they're doing. But then there might be, say, if you went to an agency, they might have like links to like really like insane packaging companies that can do like really bespoke like cutters for box packaging and do something really wacky with it that fits with a certain brand. So it's definitely really good to look at like who's working with who around your industry. Um, and then obviously like budget and pricing is really important. Um, we're in essentially a recession. Money's not as like available as it was a couple of years ago, perhaps. So this can really dictate who you're working with. But I would say, obviously, realistically, if a designer's like way out of budget, they might not be the right person for you. But if you find the one and reach out and it's a couple of £100 difference to what you're expecting to pay, there might be some wiggle room to make it work. That designer might not have immediate availability. They might be working like 2 months ahead of when their availability opens, which would find you like give you two months to find the extra couple of £100 if needs be, if you really wanted to go ahead and work with them. or they might take a deposit up front and then payment within 30 days of like completion. So that kind of like buys a little bit of time. Or in some instances, like they might be happy to take a bit of a payment plan if you have like a really honest conversation about like, really want to work with you. Um, but at the minute, this is a bit out of budget, but could we pay X amount every X weeks? Obviously, it's down to the individual designer. But I just wanted to kind of like highlight that it's not just a case of this is the price and you've got to pay it the day that you get the email telling you the price. It doesn't have to be as scary as that. There's always like options that you can explore, and if there's like that bit of wiggle room to make it work, then you might end up being able to work with someone that is like kind of beyond your wildest dreams in terms of bringing your brand and your identity to life. Um, and don't forget, there's a whole world out there. Like the world is your oyster with how like vast and wide the internet is. You could be working with someone in a completely different time zone, um, who could bring a whole different thing to your brand. I've seen some like really great brand designers, especially across like America, Australia, doing like insanely good things. There's nothing stopping anyone in England working with them, in Europe working with them. Obviously, take into consideration time zones and if that might affect things a little bit. But yeah, the world truly is your oyster in terms of creative hiring. I would say how not to find a designer. There's sites like Fiverr and Upwork, which seem great on face value, like, oh, get a job done for super cheap, like really affordable. But to put it bluntly, you're gonna often get what you pay for. They're kind of full of people looking to make a bit of extra money, but it is a little bit of a race to the bottom, unfortunately. Not to say that there's not good people on there that are being paid fairly, but it might reflect in the work that you receive, and I would be super cautious of that. You might expect less of a bespoke experience. Whenever I've been on them sites and just had a kind of like little nosy through, it seems to be that there's like get a logo for £20 and it's a template and they've just changed a different brand name for your brand name. It's not anything super unique that's like really bespoke to your brand. Obviously, with hiring anyone, you would do your research, whether that's in an interview format or it's hiring someone to tile your bathroom. You'd always obviously look at their credentials and look at the price and look at like the service that they're actually offering. And I think it's really important to not just go with like the first person or the cheapest person that you come across. Obviously, that person might be the right fit, but it's definitely good to have in mind that there's like lots of options out there. Um, there's obviously the option to do it yourself. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this. There's kind of a bit of a time and place for it, but um, if you can make it work for like your first year of business, like Charlotte said, she did that for the first year and a half and then thought, right, I'm ready to take like that step and hire someone and offload it. Not a problem with that. Um, your business on day one is going to look different to your business a year in. You're not going to know every single nuance about your customer on the first day that you go into business, that you set up with HMRC or whatever. Um, if you spent that time kind of got a bit of a placeholder logo in like on your website, kind of just floating around, um, that kind of gives you that time to understand who your customer is, who you like, where your brand positioning is, and then you've got the time to kind of put the money aside to then in a year's time think about should I maybe look at hiring someone to do these bits for me and invest now? It obviously can be in the early days of operating, like right when you set up shop, you can hire a graphic designer. There's just a time and place for everything. And obviously, you as a small business owner are gonna know what is right for you and what you're like kind of putting out into the world. Um, if you are DIYing, if you are DIYing, I would just be mindful that sites like Canva can sometimes fall into like that same ballpark as Fiverr, especially for like logo design. So they might have templates in place where you can just swap your kind of badge or template out with your brand name, which yeah, it might be like a stopgap for a little while, but it might mean that someone down the road has the exact same logo as you and it doesn't set you apart, and that could have a hindrance on your brand. Um, but having said that, Canva does have its place. It's really good for like templates. It's a lot easier for a non-designer to use compared with like the Adobe suite. Um, so definitely not like a shitting on Canva sort of thing. Like it's got its time and place. Just maybe be mindful that it doesn't fall into that same ballpark as Fiverr with having things that are kind of more on the templated side. Um, you can also approach a designer to act as a consultant or just to do a bit of artworking for you. That's like some designers are happy to do that. You might have done your own logo and think that it's really good, but you might just want that second professional opinion on it. Or you might have like a logo that you've hand drawn yourself in your own handwriting and it feels really like relevant for your brand. But you might need a bit of help vectorizing that so it works as an actual logo rather than just being an image file or a photo of your handwriting. Um, there's a lot of designers out there that I'm sure would be more than happy to take that on and work with it and then build like a color palette around that or bring in some secondary fonts. Obviously, down to the designer as an individual and how they run their business. But that's definitely an option as well in terms of like half DIY, half not. Um, and then, as touched upon before, it's not just designers that you might want to think about. There's tons of other people that you could bring into your business. Um, Obviously, as a small business, might not be relevant from the early days. But if you're looking to expand and kind of grow your business as a global thing, then you might want to start bringing in a web designer and a web developer to make you a custom website. Or you might be thinking maybe we should look at our strategy for the next like 5, 10 years and hire someone that's like really equipped to do that. There's tons of people that you can get involved in a creative process, all kind of in that realm of branding. And obviously, as before, the world is your oyster and you don't know where your business or brand could go. So it's definitely like good to have these things in mind too. Um, we've got a little quick break at this point, for 10 minutes. If anyone wants to go make a cuppa or go to the loo or whatever, I am gonna mute my thing, turn my video off for 10 minutes, and I will be back at 10 past 8. Obviously, it's quite a long talk, so I didn't want to super inundate everyone with loads of information in one huge 2 hour go. So we will see you again in 10 minutes' time. Hello, hello, hello. I am back. Um, I'm gonna crack on and assume that everyone else is. Um, yeah, cool. So the next section chats about what the design process can look like. Again, I feel like a hot topic or like common theme of a lot of this is it obviously will differ designer to designer. Everyone has their own process, their own boundaries, their own way of doing things that works for them that gives kind of the optimum output as a designer or a creative that they've kind of honed in on over years of practice. No right or wrong way again, but this is an example of how things can kind of work out. You'd obviously reach out to your graphic designer. You found someone that you want to work with, but how do you approach them? Have an expectation, an idea of expectation versus reality. It's inevitably going to vary from designer to designer based on workflow boundaries, but a lot of the time, branding work, designers have specific time frames or time slots available. Um, I know for me personally, this kind of work takes up a lot of brain space, and I like to really be able to focus on it for a good like 2.5 weeks, um, to get the bulk of the work done, where I'm not like kind of working on any other client stuff. I've not overbooked myself. I'm not trying to like do anyone a disservice. Um, that's going to be the case for a lot of designers, where they obviously want to do like the best job that they can. So they might tell you that they've not got the availability for a couple of months. Um, but yeah, kind of invest time and thought into that as well as your budget. Um, be prepared for a little bit of a wait. Um, it's all in good faith. Uh, you would reach out to a designer by introducing your brand. As I said before, just saying hi and their name is really nice. Sometimes I just get emails with no kind of actual formal addressee or whatever. And it kind of makes me think, have you like read anything about what I do, or are you sending this exact same email to like 10 different people? Um, Explain how you found them just because it's quite nice to know where the work's coming from. And helps us understand where is best for us to market ourselves too, because obviously like if it's good work, we want more of it. So it's nice to kind of hear that if you found a graphic designer on Instagram or you saw the work on Pinterest or you've had them on LinkedIn for ages or you saw the work in a physical space in a book or a poster out in the wild, it's just like a nice kind of way to introduce how you've come across them. Um, have a bit of an elevator pitch of your brand or your product or whatever it is that you're briefing. Um, Kind of just like a super short idea of who you are, what you're doing, um, and what you want from them. If you're going to need like print assets, digital assets, if you want just branding stuff, like initial kind of starter package stuff, an idea of the sort of turnaround you're hoping for, and of course, an idea of what budget you might have in mind. So this is an example of the process that I follow. Um, Obviously the first thing is all the email admin, and then would come a contract. It's kind of like a bit of a red flag if someone's not sending out a contract that outlines the scope of the brief, the project, the costing, working terms, information on payment, um, general payment terms. This is going to make everything clear for everyone involved and is a document that everyone can refer back to if there's any disputes anywhere down the line. Obviously, most of the time there isn't going to be a dispute. Like if someone's offering a professional service, there should be no reason why anyone's having to dispute anything. But having a contract is pretty vital, and just kind of keeps everything in check. From this point, once that's signed and any deposits are taken, you jump on a discovery call. Um, this is something that I do specifically for like branding inquiries or bigger projects where I can actually like kind of meet the person behind the brand, have a really good chat about what they're wanting, have a look through their mood boards, discuss different kind of strategy related things. So all that back of house stuff that I've mentioned at the beginning, kind of touch upon those bits from their perspective, because obviously as a business owner or a brand owner, product creator, whatever, you know your product or your offering better than I ever will. So to have that like really open conversation about your brand and where you see it going and things that you want to have involved in your branding is super important for me personally as a graphic designer. I'd then take that in and within like a week to a week and a half, maybe sometimes 2 weeks, come up with an initial concept, which would have kind of that starter route of font choices, color choices. I'd do a bit of my own research and pull a different mood board together of how, because obviously I might see things that you've not seen. Um, I might have an idea for something and need a visual to kind of back it up. All that kind of comes in that first deck for me, and then we move on to like feedback. I tend to offer like one round of feedback just to keep things concise. I am pretty lenient. Like if obviously if it's like, no, I don't like that, no, I don't like that, no, I don't like that, I'm going to be a bit like, okay, so it's going to take longer. There might be extra fees. But if it's kind of like 2 rounds of feedback and everything's near enough there, there's just like one tiny little tweak, a lot of us will be pretty like sympathetic to that and just kind of like put it in with the pricing. Then you get your amended concept back, we go to sign off, and then we go to the file handover. Um, Again, back with the discovery call chat, some of us do that, some of us might use questionnaires, um, some of us might meet our clients in person. Some ideas for what to consider sharing with your graphic designer at this point would be an understanding of your brand, who your target audience is from your perspective, all that info, again, as I said, about like your back of house stuff, your brand positioning, your brand personality, even if it's just a rough idea, it's good for us to know in those early days how you're seeing your brand as the owner of it, who you see your competitors as, what you don't think represents your brand. If you've got like a specific like tone of voice or a color that you really don't want associated with what you're doing, tell us that. We're more than happy to hear what you don't want as much as what you do want. And obviously, mood boards are absolutely great and a really good way to convey like visuals. Obviously, they have to be, there's kind of a cut-off point where they are just kind of like visual stimuli, used sort of as inspiration points. So be mindful that like whatever you provide your designer, they're not just gonna like be taking that exact thing that already exists and rehashing it for you. It's just kind of like a touch point of, I like this kind of color palette or these kind of fonts are quite cool. And then we can run with that and we're on the same page as you visually. And then obviously, if you've got an idea of where you might see your brand in the future, um, any ideas of like brand growth, it's good to know if this is going to be something where we could build on it over time, or if it's like a one-off project and you just want your branding done all in one go and leave it like that for a good 3, 5 years. Um, that kind of helps us get a feel for the longevity of what we're doing, or if it could be something that moves and is quite fluid and changes over time. Obviously, the more that you put in, the more that you'll get out at this stage. So I've got an example of some work that I did a couple of years ago for a digital marketer called Sam Ferguson. So Sam's industry is women's wellness and fertility marketing, which obviously have a very vague understanding of some like parts of her industry, but it's not something I'm super like immersed in. Sam is, I think she's like in her mid 40s, like not like kind of in this maker space that I often work with. But she'd seen the work that I do through a mutual friend and wanted to go ahead and book him for some branding stuff. So we kind of went through and had that initial call. She told me all about why she's doing what she's doing, like personal stories relating to her industry, like and her specifically. She gave me so much information. I remember coming off the call thinking, wow, like I kind of have a really good understanding of where she is in her business journey and what she wants from me, even though in terms of like women's wellness and fertility, specifically marketing, that's not something that I'm super clued up on. So we worked with her and we created like a logo suite, um, a little brand icon, and then we brought in some really simple shapes that kind of worked around like a lotus sort of shape and like this kind of abstract visual of someone like speaking to convey like the marketing side of things, a really like soft color palette. And this is a little bit different to like a lot of the work that I normally do. The outcome is still, it's got like them sort of abstract shapes that are often associated with my work in particular, but still like really like stylized to her industry and relevant for her. Um, on the flip side, I thought it'd be cool to show you a mood board that Brooke from Nighttime Holiday had sent me last year. So Nighttime Holiday is a jewelry brand. If you're not already aware of it, Brooke creates really gorgeous like silver pieces and beaded pieces, and she kind of went off on a little niche of creating pet tags that are fully customized with different shapes, and obviously like just to sit on a pet's collar. And it got to a point where she was like, this needs to be a sister brand rather than being under Nighttime Holiday. So she got back in touch and like told me all about it and supplied me with this mood board, which really gave me an idea of what she wanted. And because she's obviously a client that I've worked with before on the Nighttime Holiday stuff, and it kind of needed to be more of like a sister sort of thing in line with the Nighttime Holiday bits. Um, it was just really nice to kind of have that really specific visual direction from her, um, so that I could like nail that branding and provide her with everything that she needed for a launch, early on. But I thought it'd be helpful to sort of see this is kind of a bit of a different mood board to what I would, as a designer, receive off a client. Often it is just like things that you've pulled from Pinterest or like other kind of existing artworks, which is absolutely acceptable and fine. But yeah, I thought it'd be quite an interesting one to share this as well, where it's a little bit more specific, where she had like colours in mind, she had a logo sort of layout in mind. Um, and we built on that and created the cutest brand in the world. Um, so personally, I wanted to chat about in terms of process. I offer one concept on most of the briefs that I take on, whether that's branding or otherwise, and that's just something that like I've refined and find works for me in terms of not having to charge people for like loads of concepts that they're not going to use. I can put all my effort into like that one thing and make it the best that it can be and then build on that from there. It kind of means that I can just focus all my creative energy on the right in the right place, and be more streamlined with what I'm presenting to a client. But as I said before, and as I'm going to say again throughout this talk, there is no right and wrong, and it's going to differ from from designer to designer. Some people offer like three concepts, some will offer more even. It's down to what works best for them. And you might have a rough idea of like what you want to see. You might have a couple of different ideas in your mind of how your brand might look, and like you might not be able to make that choice for yourself. You can convey that to your designer and see if they can kind of explore different options. Um, there's pros and cons to either way of doing it. And yeah, it is going to be like just down to that individual each time. In terms of feedback and amends, this kind of links back to that contract stuff. Your designer might outline how many rounds of feedback you'll get. This isn't us being like lazy or mean or anything. It just helps us consolidate everything into as few back and forths as possible because sometimes it can get a bit nitpicky, and it just helps with like that efficient decision making. But as I said, if it's just little things, we're often quite lenient and we're not going to be like, "Oh, I'm going to bill you an extra hour for moving one word up a little bit or whatever." Um, but yeah, be honest when you're giving feedback. You're paying for a service. We ultimately want you to be happy with it. And if you're not feeling the way that something looks in like an initial deck, or amends have been taken in a way that wasn't what you intended, just like let us know that. And we can adjust as needed. Obviously, we want the best outcome possible and want to do the best job possible, and that with that comes like the client satisfaction. So yeah, that was just like a little insight into feedback and amends. Um, in terms of files that you can expect to receive, you are going to receive any logo files as vectors. So you'd have a .ai, .svg, .pdf, or .eps file. These are what you might see as like base files, and they're normally designed in Adobe Illustrator. Vectors are basically just scalable file types. So if you had a logo and you put it on a billboard and it was a vector logo, it's going to look as crisp and clear as it would on a tiny little business card. Um, it just means that your important points of your brand can be scaled up and down as much or as little as you need to without losing any resolution, things going blurry. If you think about if you were to scale a photograph up to a huge size, it's going to look pixelated at some point, and a vector file will not do that. Also, like the right kind of file to be sending if you're getting merch made and things are being screen printed, for example, that is going to need to be like a layered vector um, artboard. So yeah, you can expect to be getting those kind of files from your designer, and then you can expect to be getting ready to use files, which is usually image files or GIFs, which are just like there to be used right away. So that could be social media posts, web banners, social media banners, um, things like poster files, which would tend to be like more PDF but containing potentially like JPEG aspects like within the artboard. You might get a brand guide, which is a deck explaining how you use all the different elements of your new branding so that you know like about the spacing if you ever need to like fill out templates and things within like Canva or whatever program you're using, just to make sure that like everything's legible and cohesive with the brand that has been built. And then you've got other things like your miscellaneous deliverables, kind of touches on with this bit about ready to use stuff. Um, Anything like business cards, packaging, that would all kind of come under here. And there's like an array of different file types that you might receive. But again, you can ask your designer about what is best for each thing. They might do it based off whichever print service you're using. They might have a template where you've got to like design into the template. Just as long as communicated well with your designer, that's something that we can do too. Um, the big one is cost and investment, obviously. There's a lot of things to consider when it comes to like how we price our work. Obviously, our professional level, how many years of expertise we have, whereabouts in the world we live, the size of a project, the size of the client. By this, I'm kind of meaning like if a massive global client such as Apple came to me saying, Apple wants a rebrand, uh, we want you to do it. I'm obviously going to adjust any pricing compared with a small business coming to me asking for the same thing. Um, the bigger the client, obviously, the assets carry a lot more value, more eyes on the work. So we've got to kind of adjust things accordingly. But in the kind of world of like small independent businesses, your designer will obviously have that in mind in the other way, where the pricing will be fairer, a more realistic kind of price point for that size business. Some people quote on a project by project basis. Some people might have a set offering where they list what you can get for different pricing tiers. Occasionally, some people might just go off like a day rate or an hourly rate for any ad hoc work. It again just boils down with what they're comfortable with and what works for them, in terms of getting paid fairly for the amount of hours that are being put in. You might not know how much to expect things to cost for the specific person that you're reaching out to, but you might have a vague idea of the budget that you're looking to spend. I think my only advice there is just to be realistic and think about how, like, obviously it's someone's career and often there's a lot of work that goes into it, not just the hours like sat at a desk. A lot of like think space, especially with branding work, is taken up, and it's an investment that's going to last like quite a long time, hopefully, and grow and evolve with your business's success. When we as freelancers particularly ask about budget in any capacity, we're not doing so to sort of bleed you dry of the top end of that budget. Um, it can often be easier for us to just let you know exactly what we can offer for the money that you're looking to spend. Or bluntly, it also helps us figure out if it's just not going to work at all. I've had like inquiries where it's ended up being like not even like an eighth of what I actually charge. Um, and I understand like people don't know how much things cost. It is obviously very much a hush hush thing, and like it's one of them things until you reach out to someone you don't understand what you might actually get and for what price. But if people are upfront with the budget in the first place, we can kind of avoid that spending a couple of hours tailoring a quote to them when from the off it was never going to happen. I've done that a lot of times where I've spent like 1 or 2 hours really thinking about what someone's asking me for, and then it comes back with it's out of budget, but I've asked about the budget, but they won't tell me the budget, in which case it becomes a bit like this Spider-Man meme where uh, it's the age-old debate of tell me your budget, give me your quote. Um, so then the juicy bits about pricing are obviously the numbers. So this is what I offer as a core offering for small businesses and independent makers. Again, after spending years tailoring quotes to people, I realized that most of the businesses are roughly the same sort of size that come to me. So it makes sense to have like a set offering where no one's being overcharged or undercharged. They're all like on a level pegging field, a level playing field, sorry, and they get that core service and then any extra deliverables are added on top of there. For this, I tend to offer, obviously, again, person to person. It might be different, but I offer 2 Zoom calls, visual research and mood board, which obviously includes like all that back of house stuff, thinking about who your target audience is, where you are in the market, um, your brand values and all those kind of like strategy related things that inform the visuals, type and color palette development, one concept with 3 variations of your logo, a round of feedback, and then sign off and hand over with all the files supplied as black and white vector versions and full color ready to use stuff. Um, Often I tend to include things like brand patterns or like the odd like kind of icon or like a little bit of illustration work because that's kind of intertwined with the work that I do. But yeah, that's the sort of offering that I have as a graphic designer for small biz. Um, but obviously it's not all about me. There's a whole array of different pricing that people tend to kind of come up with for different things. And this in particular, um, basically, I set up a few Instagram polls for the first edition of this talk, and I asked fellow graphic designers, what's your average starting price for branding related design work? Start branding for a small brand selling mid-price homewares based in the UK. Um, and the responses that I got were 4 people said less than £400, 12 people £400 to £800, 14 people £801 to £1,200, 17 people £1,201 to £1,600, and then because Instagram only lets you put 4 options, the next lot were 1601 to £2,000 was 5 people, 2001 to £2,400, one person, 2,401 to 2,800, 6 people, and then upwards of £2,801 was another 6 people. So some of these I know like work in agency, so they could have been giving like them agency prices. Obviously, when you get to the upper end of the scale, it I don't know like what specifically them numbers are looking like on this. However, I've not included it in the actual talk bit because I didn't want to just like throw numbers at people because it can be quite overwhelming. And as I was reading all them out, then I was thinking, this is just me speaking numbers out. But in the PDF guide, I actually then took this to um, SurveyMonkey and put it on my LinkedIn and back again on my story, where it was more of an extended survey asking the same question about pricing. And then that took into other factors like geographical location, how the designer presents himself, whether they say that they're a studio, whether it's their own name, if they offer other services in with what like their offering is. And then we've also got like a thing about varying day rates across the globe as well. So that will be in the guide that you'll be sent after this talk. Um, obviously there's a lot to consider what um what kind of builds that price. Um, there's a lot of reasoning for the costs that, especially like branding projects, kind of are quoted at. The amount of time spent on branding things, often branding is a bit of a journey, and we do a lot of pixel pushing from start to finish to get things looking um, kind of right and at a point where we're happy to show up to the client. Um, it can often take a handful of weeks at least from an email admin to file sign off. Sometimes it can take longer if you're like a bigger brand with more people to run each decision by, or you're working with a studio and they're doing an even bigger brand package for you. It can be like months worth of work. So that's kind of why branding often has like quite a higher price tag compared with other types of design work. Um, it's obviously an investment and it should be a series of design elements that have longevity and should be with your brand for years. If you think of any established brand with a strong visual presence, that's going to stay with them for 5 to 10 years at least because it becomes really instantly recognizable. It's so tied with a product or a service. If you think about it in an analogy of like cost per wear, that initial investment has got a really long lifespan. Um, and while it is an investment to begin with, hopefully it's one that would pay off over like upwards of 3, 5, 10 years. There's a lot of unseen bits, which I kind of briefly mentioned then about the pixel pushing, all the back of house stuff that we obviously use to inform our pricing, but that might not be kind of specifically there in a deck when you receive like that first concept off your designer. Not everything that gets to the final product is visible. And for some designers, a lot of time goes into like the research, strategy, nudging and tweaking things. It's not just that final deliverable or that final logo set and color palette. There's going to have been lots of different developmental bits in between that don't make the cut for a presentation or deck. Um, some other things to regard in terms of like money, you can absolutely ask if your designer offers a payment plan. Often we take deposits for design work, particularly for like higher ticket work, like branding projects. So you'd be paying a percentage up front and a percentage upon completion, which would be like a number of weeks spaced out. Obviously that can lighten the load a little bit with payment and money stuff. But again, like there's no harm asking, could we maybe do it in increments? And there's also absolutely no harm in having your design stuff physically done in increments too. Obviously, in an ideal world, every client's going to have a healthy budget to let us like really delve into a brief and like hunker down and spend like as much time as we need on every aspect of a brand's identity, so it all looks really gorgeous and cohesive. But the reality is that a lot of the time for small businesses, it's just not financially feasible. And we really understand as designers that that's not reality. And especially when we're working with small businesses, independent makers, solo entrepreneurs, like you might choose to put focus on like your strategy, your logo, color palette, type, and then fill in with like print deliverables down the line. Um, it doesn't all have to be done in that one foul swoop. Um, it can be something that grows with your brand as you need it to. I thought it'd be nice to add in a bit of a mini case study to sort of back that up. With some work from Nighttime Holiday, who this is the original brand that Brooke owns from Got the Goods. So I first worked with Brooke back in 2018 when Nighttime Holiday was a jewelry brand that sold polymer clay earrings. So Brooke used to make these gorgeous, like bright, abstract shaped earrings out of polymer clay in like loads of different gorgeous colours. Um, so for the brand's first birthday, she was looking to update the identity and launch a new website. So that's what we did. And this is what we came up with in that initial branding sort of sprint. And then over the years, we've incrementally revisited the nighttime holiday branding, given it little updates so that visuals align with the way that the brand's grown. Nowadays, she creates a lot of beaded and silver pieces, um, all by hand, like all completely handmade, gorgeous pieces. And it kind of felt right that we brought in some of these like textural elements, soften the color palettes, brought in care cards, changed up some of the packaging elements. Um, but again, like it still looks like that brand that people began to recognize from the early 2018 days. Um, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing things like this, especially for small businesses. Like the world's not going to stop if you change your color palette 5 years down the line. Obviously, good to keep some consistency. Um, but yeah, like we can do things over like an extended period of time to lighten the load on you as a small business owner. Sometimes like a brand's offering changes or the audience changes a little bit or there's new products and things don't feel quite like they stack up anymore. So it's totally fine to sort of revisit and tweak things as your brand grows. As long as you're communicating with your designer about it, not a problem. Some other things to consider, which briefly mentioned about before, like with scaling your business and back to the notion of like investing in your brand. Um, Branding is best considered as an investment in your long-term growth. While some brands do work better at smaller scale and some small business owners are happy keeping things local and manageable, again, absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Um, it's also worth considering that there is a whole world out there and you might want to scale. So investing in your branding so that your product looks like it's scalable, could be a reasoning to kind of go ahead and make that investment. If you want to sell your products wholesale to like a national retailer, say like Oliver Bonus or something like that, or if you wanted to open like a second bricks and mortar shop or a restaurant, does that branding that you're paying for align with the future goals, or could it be holding that brand or product back? Um, it's definitely something to consider when you're outsourcing. And then this is kind of like a minor thing, but it's a bit, I feel like it's something that's not really chatted about too much, but um, is perhaps worth mentioning that like depending on who you work with, that might be new eyes on your work as well from their like kind of perspective. Um, like consider who your designer is, who they're surrounded by, who's generally interested in their work, what other clients they have, and if that could have a bit of a crossover with your product or offering. So if you are going to someone that works with loads of people in your industry, then that could lend itself to you forging connections with your peers in your industry through having the same designer. Um, like often we'll share our work across social media. It goes on Pinterest, it goes on things like Behance, it might get picked up by It's Nice That or um, Creative Boom and websites like that. It's basically free marketing that comes with that initial design investment. Disclaimer that it's not guaranteed to boost your sales or kind of send your business into a £1 million making kind of machine. But I think it's something that does go a little bit unacknowledged sometimes and could be something worthwhile thinking about when you're considering who to hire. And then this is the last section prior to the Q&A, effective collaboration tips. Obviously, come prepared. We've obviously touched on this heavily throughout. But go into things with the info about your brand quite strong in your mind, even if it's like the starter points or like them very initial like ideas. If you've got like a definite, yes, this is who my audience is, or this is the kind of color palette that I'm leaning towards, um, like obviously we can collaboratively dive into that together as designer and client, but it's good to have like that preparation there and bring that to the table. As said before, what you put in equates to what you get out. But no one knows your brand like you do. So share all that knowledge with your designer and have them in-depth conversations. Um, Sit with the work, but be mindful of schedules. Obviously, in terms of providing good feedback, it's good to spend some time with like the visuals that your designers supplied you with initially. See what is and isn't working for you, but be mindful of responding with feedback in good time so that the project can stick to any scheduling. As long as contracts allow, you can definitely get peer opinions on developmental stuff, but obviously be mindful that sometimes too many cooks can spoil the broth. I think in terms of this, like it's just good to sort of have a bit of time with it and see how it feels for you as the business owner, and not just kind of scream, yeah, this is amazing without like thinking about it, or no, I hate that without kind of understanding a designer's reasoning for doing things, um, is quite important. And honesty is obviously always the best policy. I would say like the best feedback I get is where I get told that something isn't working and then I can build on that and it gives me a clear idea of why it's not working or what the client might be gravitating more towards instead. Um, Perhaps it's like a color in a color palette that's a bit too out there and evokes the wrong emotions. Or you think that a secondary font that your designer's chosen just doesn't go with what you're aiming for. Honesty is really invaluable in the feedback rounds, and we ultimately obviously want you as the client to be happy with the final outcome. A lot of the time you might be spending a lot of money to kind of get those deliverables that really scream about what your brand is. The constructive feedback should eventually lead to that. As long as it's respectful and you're mindful of our expertise and reasoning. Um, Obviously we're open to any and all comments. And as the name of the talk indicates, it is a creative partnership. Um, on the back of that, don't forget to tell us what you like too. That helps us kind of do more of what is good, and make that more of a focal point. If you like the layout of some secondary type, but you want it to be repurposed elsewhere, just let us know and we can do that and we can implement it more. Um, it's really like nice to hear that we've the bits that we've nailed as much as it is good to hear like the constructive feedback. And then be personal but also impartial. Obviously, we've got our own opinions of things. We might hate a certain color, but it might work for the product that you're selling. Um, it's kind of like worthwhile constantly circling back to your target market and your brand positioning, your strategy, and all them back of house things, um, because that might have an equal or greater impact on the success of your branding than your own personal taste. But of course, if you're really hating something, as I said before, do tell us. And then if you need specific file sizes, specific like templated things done, if your printer um has like a thing online with AI files for us to by AI, sorry, I mean dot AI, not AI as in artificial intelligence. But if like your printer, say you use like printed.com and they've got specific like templates for us to use, um, let us know that or like ask your printer about that and we can get all that sorted so everything's like ready to go instead of designing things in one way and then having to tweak it for a template later down the line. Obviously, it's sometimes not something you know until you've spoken to your specific like service provider. But handy either way. And we'll always be open to re-artworking things. Obviously, we're not just going to turn around and say no. And then the last thing is to trust the process. Obviously, we might share initial concepts and sketches which don't look as finalized, which is really fine and normal. With these, you can kind of get a rough idea of how things are going to start to feel. Um, but obviously it's not quite there yet as a refined concept. Just the process. But if you feel like you need to see something less rough or need like an actual kind of more designed variation of something, there's absolutely no harm in asking to see it at its next stage along. Like again, more than happy, a lot of us to do that and help you see the vision as we see it as designers. And that is everything. We've got a little Q&A section at the end. If anyone wants to ask any specific questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. If it's like specific to your business or if it's more general, if it's anything that you want to like kind of go back to within the talk, please feel free.
I'm
Absolutely no pressure though if no one has.
I think I'm going to read, if this is okay, I'm going to read a question that we got sent
Yeah, of course.
we have covered it a little bit, but it might be worth just revisiting.
Hmm.
Okay, so this person's asked, they're looking to, what's it called? I don't know whether to read the whole thing. I'll read the whole thing. Okay, I'm an architect currently dabbling in interior and product design and looking to brand my services. Can I do this myself or do I need to hire a professional? Um, I think I do, but I want to know the pros and cons. So we've obviously covered this a little bit, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I think there's absolutely, as like mentioned earlier on, there's nothing at all wrong with doing bits yourself. And as I said, that first year of business, the first day versus day 365 might be completely different. So you don't want to like rush into things and be like, oh, this is my product, this is exactly who I'm selling to. And then when it comes to it, things change over that first year or first couple of years, and you've spent all this money like getting everything ready before you launch. I think it's more than fine to sit with it for as long as you need to and DIY it for as long as you need to. Just obviously be mindful that like using specific like sites, say like Canva and using like their logo packages, you might not get a bespoke outcome and that might hinder things in the long run. But yeah, we're in that kind of space where like small businesses, it's a massive risk to take to spend the money. And a lot of the people that come to me in particular, like I can speak from that experience that they're people that have ran their business for however long and done it themselves for however long. And then it gets to a point where things are sort of taking off and they want to polish everything up and get a new look and feel and launch something visually new to kind of take them to that next step of the business. So yeah, DIYing, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
This, I don't know if this is necessarily that relevant, but I'm curious to know whether there's any challenges you have faced over the last 8 years doing what you do, working in partnership with people that maybe has
Hmm.
surprised you or I don't know,
Yeah.
disappointed maybe seems a bit extreme,
I
but is there anything
think
that's happened?
I wouldn't say like disappointed, not disappointed in the client particularly or anything. Maybe more like disappointed in myself from like a very self-critical like kind of perspective. I've had and it is particularly like branding stuff before I kind of like had a proper look at like what I was offering and what I was like how I was pricing things and like the process and everything. I was kind of being a little bit more like slapdash about it. This is like we're going back like 3, 4 years, and I had a couple of clients where it kind of it just didn't come to the best outcome, or like I wasn't understanding properly what they wanted and we weren't on the same page, and like they were a bit like lackadaisical about it and being a bit like, oh yeah, that's cool, and not giving me anything to kind of work on. I would say like it was more of like I walked away from like projects being a bit like, we can't carry on like that. And I think every designer's like not every single like client experience is going to be the perfect one, and like it's going to be like a brilliant partnership where it's like amazing outcomes all of the time. But it's just like a learning kind of curve, I guess. Um, but obviously, in those instances, I was like super sympathetic to the fact that like things weren't done to the right standard, and I'm not going to take the money for that because we've just things haven't gone right there. But yeah, that was definitely like something where it's not been as positive as the majority of those collaborations are.
I have one more question, which feels like, sorry, I'm asking all the questions. We've had this before on the last call, and I've mentioned it to you earlier, but I was wondering if people are like right at the beginning of their journey,
Hmm.
like changing their business up, what would you say is the most important element to start with when you think like your brand design?
Yeah, that's a really good one because obviously, like, it's so overwhelming and there's so many things depending on your product or service that you can put your money into. I would say thinking more of like the back of house stuff is super important because that sort of informs all those visual outcomes that can come further down the line. Really understanding like who your customer is, how you're positioning your product or service. Um, and then if you're like moving on to the actual physical visual design stuff, obviously like some kind of logo, basic color palette, basic type choices are going to be the most important bits. They're going to be the bit that you see in the most places, whether that's cross print and digital. And then, much like with the nighttime holiday stuff, things can tweak and change, and new things can come, like for all your other deliverables down the line, and you can build on that. But I think obviously it's easy for us as designers to be like, it's not just a logo, but if you had to pick something, the logo and the accompanying color palette and type is the thing that it boils down to if you kind of take it down to the skeleton. So I'd have to say like if that's like you what you're thinking of doing,
Mm.
go for those things first, which is like to take it back to like what I offer as like a core offering. That's what I found that most people inquire about, especially with small businesses. And then the other bits might come later on. They'll be like, oh, we need a flyer for this event, or we want to do this, or can we like do some like printed tissue paper to wrap our products in? Um, that's something that we can just kind of knock up later down the
Oh,
line.
one more question, because I know, yeah. Just one more. Um, you Is it commonplace for a designer to take on a project that's already been started by someone else? So say another designer's done it and then but they're not happy and they want to work with someone else but still use certain elements.
Yeah, so there's definitely like cases where people have had like a whole brand identity done and then or they've worked with like an agency or studio, for example. Um and then outsourced other bits of design to other designers or illustrators or whatever. Um, Again, speaking from my experience, I know that like I think Pentagram did the Garden Museum's design, and I get provided with like a brand guidelines with all their brand colours, all the fonts that they use and how to use them, and then I create like creative visuals using those elements, but obviously like in my illustrative style for things like tasting menus at the cafe, and like different events at the actual museum. So that's like super normal. I think perhaps if you've had like a bad experience with a graphic designer and kind of got half a job done, maybe, or it's kind of ended on a bit of a sour note, there might be a little bit of like awkwardness in taking that to someone else. Um, and especially like I think for me personally, like I'm very like comfortable with the offering that I give. And I don't know how comfortable I would be with taking on half finished work from someone else and then kind of changing that because then it kind of like in terms of like copyright and stuff gets a little bit like of a grey area. But then having said that, I've worked with Jenny and Alex who ran Happy Mart last year and they had like a little illustration that they'd drawn up just like on iPad on Procreate. And it was just like a raster, so like an image file. But I was like able to help with vectorizing that so that it could be blown up and was made into like a huge like vinyl thing from the wall. So that kind of goes with what I was saying before about if you say you had like a handwritten logo and you really wanted to use that, we can help with stuff like that. I think the disparity comes with if it's come from someone else and there's been like bad terms or something, then
Yeah.
obviously we've kind of got to be careful that we're not stepping on any toes. But again, it's a really individual thing to each situation.
Yeah.
So what might not be okay in one situation might be fine in another.
That's good to know. Obviously, we're fine, you know.
She's gonna go elsewhere, guys.
This is, yeah, intrigued because yeah, it's a very like with copyright and stuff and like your art
Mm,
of our markets gets copied a lot. And
hmm.
it's just it's a really weird, confusing realm that I don't
Yeah.
know about. But yeah.
So that kind of goes back to like that mood board sort of thing though as well, where like and like I have that written in my contract where I say any references that we're showing to each other like, oh, this is cool. I like the look of this. Love this color palette. Love this shape or this font. It is literally just that reference. It's not lift and use
Yeah.
and copy from both parts. Like, I obviously have to be very careful of that as a designer, but also as a client, I would encourage like the clients to be mindful that I'm not willing to just steal something from someone else. And hopefully, well, obviously not all designers are in the same ballpark as we know, but you would hope that most designers would be of the same opinion. It's only fair.
Yeah. Mm, I've loved this. Thanks, Han. If anyone, if does anyone have any questions, any thoughts? It's been amazing. I'm really grateful that
We're
you all
like
joined.
dead on nine. Wow.
weird. I wasn't expecting
Not
that.
1 minute over.
Really, yeah, it's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed watching it. I like it feels a bit naughty that I'm like part host and I've just been watching it and enjoying it. But thank you so much for joining us
Well, thank
and
you. Thank you for facilitating.
great.
And thanks, guys, for joining. Really
Thank you so
appreciate it.
much. I'll be in
Hopefully, it's been
touch with
helpful.
everyone. Yeah, tomorrow. Hopefully tomorrow I'll email through the video and that PDF. I've got that. So
Mhm.
you can just dip in and out then when you need it. And yeah, really grateful you bought tickets and joined us. And I hope you have a gorgeous week.
Yes.
And do keep in touch if you want to like feedback, testimonials, all welcome. Send them to the email.
Mhm.
We'd love to hear from you or give us a follow, either of us or both of us on Instagram. That would be cool too. But yeah, really appreciate it. And that's it, I think. Yeah.
All what Shah said, and more from me.
I just keep talking.
Yes, perfect. Thanks so
Yeah.
much, guys. Do I just click off here and it'll end the recording? Yeah. Or shall I stop recording? I'll do stop recording first just to make sure for my own sanity that I've actually recorded.